Hello, welcome to Unity 151. My name is Joe. On this channel, I used to do weekly sci-fi and military sci-fi and space opera reviews. Now it's kind of changed to monthly, give or take. I do a weekly live writing journey video where sometimes it's me and some booktubers, sometimes authors come on, we talk about stuff. I talk as a new, inspiring writer, and I have people who are writers come on, chat, a bit of advice, talking about stuff like that, something like that. Author interviews, which is today. We've got John Evans here. Hello, John. Yeah, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And now we're gonna get into it. John, what have you been up to?
So I have been writing book 6 for a while now with my brother, and going through a massive editing process. That's of our main series, which starts with Commando. I'm trying to point at the one on my shelf and getting the wrong.
I've got it here.
Side. This one. There you go.
That's it.
So we've just published book 6 of that series, and as well as an omnibus edition of a companion series that we wrote with Paul T. And so at the moment, we've switched over to marketing those books and working on the outline of book 7, which we've actually got some of that written already, because James went off and wrote a whole bunch of stuff. But we've got our editor going over the outline in detail for us, so that she can make recommendations before we completely finish writing the first draft. With Fleet, we had quite a lot of changes to make that she suggested, that we looked at and went, "Oh, that's a good idea. We should probably do that." And it made for a stronger book. So what we're trying to do is get more of that editing done up front, so that we have less to do on the back end, because in theory it should save us time. So that's what we're sort of working on at the moment. And then as soon as that comes back, we'll be powering through book 7. So just finishing off the writing for that, and then doing our second draft on it, and then we will send it to the editor for proper editing. So.
Perfect. Okay, let's talk about then book 6. Now I am going to just pull it up here just to show people. I'm going to do a screen share. Bear with me. My screen as I'm going will lag up because my computer's terrible. So this is, is it up? There we go. This is the one you're talking about, book 6.
Oh no, I see a spelling mistake. No, I'm kidding. But that would be the sort of live thing that would happen, where you look at your description and go, "Oh, I can't believe it."
Right. I'm trying to make it enlarged, but I can't. My computer's dying. Now let's talk about. So, do you want to? Let's talk a bit about the general story, because we're up to book 6. I'm presuming people who are going to watch this would have an idea, or they're not too fussed about a bit spoils. Let me make that bigger. Introduce us to your universe. Start with book 1 and lead up to what we got now.
Okay, so James and I have been writing the series.
James is your brother, yes?
Yeah, sorry, yeah,
yes,
my brother James.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were both writing our own books, and I actually didn't know he'd been writing a big epic fantasy series, which he's still slogging away at finishing. And when I found that out, I had just sort of got into the indie scene, and I was doing my own writing journey. And after a while, it seemed to me like James wasn't going to publish his epic fantasy, right? That he would just keep working on it and trying to polish it, because that's a common problem new writers have, is that there's a thing called imposter syndrome, which is, I believe, a real one, but as in real syndrome. It's not as in not one of the fake things that people make up that they imagine that they have. But the basic idea is that it's very easy to imagine that your work isn't good enough for the public. If you were an artist, you might think, oh no, nobody will like my art, whereas most of us would look at it and go, well, that's
quite good, actually.
Very impressive.
It's better than what I can do.
Yeah, exactly. I can't draw, so it seems mystical to me. Much like when the guy comes and like fixes a leak in my plumbing, I get that it's a skill. I get that he acquired it over years and was trained and has a lot of practice. But to a certain extent, it's mystical to me. I don't know quite what he's done or how he worked out what was wrong with the plumbing, or how somebody worked out what was wrong with my car, or whatever. So, you know, like if somebody bakes you a nice cake, you think that's amazing, but actually it's just a set of steps that you follow through, and you acquire that as a skill. And it's the same with writing. You don't need to produce a Michelin star book, right, in order for people to enjoy it. You don't need the best chocolate cake in the world for your family to go, oh, I really enjoyed that, right?
Yes.
What you don't want is, you know, Tesco's sad, dejected chocolate cake that seems to be stale no matter how quickly you buy the thing, and it's kind of dry and dull, and you think, probably wasn't worth buying this at all in the first place. So, you know, James has been working on these books for quite a long time, and because they're epic fantasy, those books are huge, right? They can be 130, 140, 150,000 words, whereas novels are usually, in most genres, are usually about 60,000 to 90,000 words, depending on the specific genre. And I was starting to understand how other people were getting their own books out there on Amazon and other sites, and making a living as an author, because I've been following the right indie podcasts, and
getting information and learning.
Business, yeah.
Yes.
And I wanted James to be able to do that rather than sit on his work forever. So I persuaded him to go to the 20 Books conference in London, which for Brits out there was actually Runnymede, but Runnymede was about as close as anybody could find a venue to have the conference, because if it had been in London, almost none of the people who went would have been able to afford to go to it, right? Because central London is
very expensive.
But no, they found a great hotel in Runnymede. There were a couple of hundred people who turned up, and I managed to persuade James to go along with me to this thing. And it was at that point that it was getting him involved in that process that made him realize, you know, that we could be serious about it. But before we went there, I persuaded him to write something together, and I said, well, if we write something together, we can theoretically get books written reasonably quickly, and we've got each other to bounce ideas off, and improve the writing, and we can edit each other to some extent, and then
it's always nice being able to just tell someone who's doing the same sort of thing as you the ideas, so then you can actually, you know, get it sounded out and see if it actually is decent or not. Because you think you have a good idea in your head, you think, oh, it's really good, then if someone else is like, not really, but you know, it's good to get it earlier.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that works. I think that works in every job that I've ever worked in. Yes, there are, you know, nobody wants to attend the meeting, right? You know, meetings, like you don't want that. But when you sit down and you say, well, we're going to go and, you know, we're going to go and do this thing in our job. Has anybody got any thoughts about it? And somebody says, well, the last time we did it, it didn't go so well because we didn't have a written down plan of things that we'd got to do. And Bob was doing too much work and Fred wasn't doing
any work.
He's good at. Yeah. And nobody knew what they were doing. And it took us way more man hours than it should have. There's always good ideas out there. And I don't think it's. I suppose it's tempting to say, particularly with creative stuff, but I don't think that's true at all. I think it doesn't matter what profession you're in, what job you're doing. If you can get a bunch of people to brainstorm together, you will come up with better ideas about how to do things. So James and I decided we would try writing something together, and because we were both writing in the epic fantasy vein, we decided we'd write sci-fi, right? Because growing up, we would both read fantasy and science fiction. We had a whole bunch of books that my dad had when he was a kid, Asimov and all that sort of stuff. And then James got into things like Terry Pratchett. And he's older than me, much older. He's a whole 3 years older than me. So I would borrow his books, right? You know, that's what families do. You know, you borrow books off people. But we both enjoyed a lot of fantasy and science fiction when we were younger. So science fiction was fairly natural to us, and we looked for an idea, and we wanted something that was reasonably simple. What we didn't want to do was do The Martian, right?
Yeah.
Which is hard science fiction, where Andy Weir had to know an awful lot about how anything like that would go ahead. And my understanding of how he wrote that is that the bits where if you've got a scientist to look at The Martian, let's say the film or whatever, that don't make sense, like apparently the scene where there's wind at the start of the thing that knocks over there's this massive storm basically that knocks over his habitat and stuff and causes the problem in the first place, wouldn't happen on Mars, right? My understanding is Andy Weir didn't really know at that point, because we knew less about Mars when he was writing the first book. Maybe if they'd known more, he might have tweaked that a bit, but it doesn't matter too much. The point is, it comes across as really real because he went into real depth in every area that he realistically could to create a realistic sci-fi thing, and we did not want to do that. We want a little bit of realism in there. We want the reader to be able to suspend disbelief, and not come across too many things that make them go, oh, that's that can't ever happen at all, or is not what I'm expecting. Okay, so we decided to write. We also wanted, we wanted to try and find something that's a little less common than some of the military sci-fi out there. And most military science fiction is either from an American perspective, or it's a United Planets type thing. It's a it's like the Federation, or Ian Banks's Culture, or something like that. It's a Earth has grown up, and humans are more impressive.
We're united
than us, in the same way that we're more impressive, we hope, than the Victorians, right? So you've got a couple of different ways of doing it. So we went with Brits, and we chose the Royal Marines because it's normal in military science fiction that the soldiers are actually Marines, and that goes back to like the 1930s. That's when the term Space Marine first became a thing. I think in the Lensman books, but please don't crucify me if I'm getting that wrong. But we wanted to use the Royal Marines because they've got a long and proud history of military service, and we wanted to extrapolate the future where the individual nations of Earth that we would recognize are for some reason still independent.
Yeah.
Right. So although we haven't gone into the background that much, the conceit is that there is still a commonwealth of countries, much as there is now. And Britain has gone into space, and China has probably gone into space, and the Americans have probably gone into space and settled colonies.
Russians.
Yeah, probably. but the Earth, but basically Sol, or our solar system,
Yes.
is at peace, right?
Mm.
And there isn't really conflict, but there are still individual nations, and they haven't united. And we've got a whole backstory that will, that
Slowly
will
get
explain
into.
that,
Yeah.
but it's not really relevant to our book. So we might go into it at some point, but we don't want to do, we don't want to put in a bunch of exposition that says, oh yes, well, and then the reason that we don't have like a one world government is blah 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 blah, blah because
Yeah, but you could just drip feed a few things across all your books, just like a little throwaway line. Someone goes, why are we not actually united? You'd be like,
Yes.
well, because of this. And it's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Just yeah.
Yes, we're trying to. So we so we got that set up, and that initial setup, and we decided that the Marines wouldn't go out in faster than light ships to rescue places and get there in a day. We wanted there to be a time lag, and we also wanted to start with a focus on the Marines rather than the Royal Navy. And so what we did was we used the highly unoriginal idea of downloading minds into cloned bodies. So in our case, our colony that first gets attacked is
New Bristol.
New Bristol, yeah.
Yep.
And colonies have an emergency deployment bay, or more than one.
I think this one had two.
Yes,
because one got destroyed.
Yeah,
and the other one was okay, weren't it?
That's correct. Yeah. So the idea is, depending on how developed a colony is and how valuable it is, and whatever threats might be in the region, they would have more resources and so on. There's no point stationing 1,000 Marines on every planet just to defend from the odd space pirate or incursion or something like that. It's a waste of manpower. So what they do is they have a whole bunch of cloned bodies ready, and when Marines are called up, they are deployed by using a wormhole to transmit their minds into these fresh cloned bodies, and then the cloning bay then sort of finishes off the body, right? So it's not a carbon copy body that everybody gets. It's a basic body that's unfinished, so it would probably look quite gross, although we haven't actually pointed that out in the books. But when you're being downloaded, your face is grown onto the body in the last stages. So you can probably imagine it like you've seen The Fifth Element, yeah?
Yep.
Where they rebuild her body with the magic 3D printer, and you're like, wow, why do you even have this poverty? If you can do that, why do you doesn't that fix all other problems?
We just do something so quickly. You build a human so fast.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why aren't you all doing extreme sports? Because they can literally just pick up your hand off the floor and just rebuild you, and your brain comes with it, which is quite clever.
Amazing. Yeah.
But anyway, so once the mind is downloaded and the body is completed, so you've got this period. It takes several hours for that to happen. Then the Marine can stand up, put on the clothes that you've got in the on standby for him, and go out and fight to save the colonists. In our case, in New Bristol, one of the emergency deployment bases has already been destroyed. And you've got to remember, this is a society that doesn't really have war, right?
Mm-hmm.
There haven't been any wars for quite a while. So usually they're expecting to deal with things like riots and natural disasters and stuff like that. maybe some space piracy and things like that, or all sorts of relatively minor things, right? But they get there and there's an actual genuine invasion going on, which is weird because it doesn't make much sense to invade
New Bristol.
Well, not only New Bristol, but anywhere really. The average alien invasion thing that you'll see, so the standard alien invasion that you'll see in Hollywood is the aliens come here and they want to either colonize the Earth or they want some special resource that we've got, like
the
brain
resource,
fluid,
or they just want the
water.
resources that are really hard to get right deep in the planet, which are floating around in space anyway. But they want ours.
Exactly, and it may well have made sense to a lot of people in the 1950s, but we do actually know what is in a lot of asteroids and stuff now, and now we're talking about asteroid mining, and there's so much gold out there, and it might actually, we're getting to the point where you could actually do asteroid mining relatively soon, and it will be cheaper than getting it from the Earth. Not to mention, nobody cares if we strip mine asteroids.
No, strip, go mad. Do what you want.
I wonder what the sort of like solar system wide consequences would be if we strip mined the entire asteroid belt, right? But not if we took enough gold for us to use the next 10 centuries, right? It would, it's better than digging it up from under trees.
Yeah, destroying the planet's just gonna,
Yeah, I mean, ultimately there's enough resources in the solar system for us.
Well, that's the thing, just the solar system. Like if we ever can get further out, you know what I mean.
Even if you imagine only 50% of solar systems had sapient life, which is way over anybody else's estimation, but still that would mean that every sapient species would have a whole other solar system that they could go and get water from, and after you've used water, it's still water. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I may put it through a toilet. You may not want to drink it straight away, but as soon as it's been through some mud and maybe some carbon filters or whatever, it's just water again. Nobody
tastes
cares.
nice, you know.
I read a thing once where they say that in every pint of water that you drink, this is Coke, by the way. It's Coke Zero. It's nothing exciting. In every pint you drink, there's a molecule that went through Oliver Cromwell's bladder. Which I don't know if that's true, but I just love the sort of the idea that, well, yeah, because the water molecules, they don't really break down very often, so they still exist. It's still the same water molecules that were there 10,000 years ago in most cases, and
just all the dirty bacteria has been cleared out of it. That's
exactly. So you're drinking Genghis Khan, or Oliver Cromwell, or anybody who lived far enough back, and you think, okay, fine, move on. But anyway, the
back to your book.
Digressing massively. So the point was, what we wanted was a reason for an invasion to take place. So from the
these are spoilers for anyone watching, just in case you don't know.
Yeah,
we are going in spoilers.
Spoilers coming up. So I'll try and do it with as light a touch as I can. The aliens invading New Bristol do want resources, and here's the big spoiler: our aliens turn out to not actually be aliens; they're humans,
comrades.
Right, and they want easily obtainable resources such as already processed materials.
They don't do it themselves.
They'll do that, but they've got a reason. They also have their own reason why they're coming back, and basically they are the descendants of one of the ark ships that was sent out in an earlier age of technology that are no longer relevant. But they settled, and now they're coming back towards what is considered human space, right? As far as everybody else was concerned, lots of these ships went out, and some of them, many of them were lost arks, right? Which again, that's actually a pretty common trope. You'll find that all over science fiction of ark ships going out, and then, many of them disappear, nobody knows why until centuries later. So they do have a reason which explains why they're doing something which is relatively crazy. But ultimately, it's about, ultimately there's a war. And if you look at wars that we've had historically, it's mostly because humans are, being silly, shall we say, put it mildly.
Yeah, most wars aren't really, waged for a good reason. Most of them, they're kind of like
no. I mean, when it comes right down to it, people could have got together in a room and just said, "Should we not do this?" And it's probably just going to cost us more than we're going to benefit from it. And have we considered trade? And trade is always the better option. But that so we're sort of exploring those ideas, and it's satisfying because to have written the most recent book, because in Fleet we get to reveal right at the end of Fleet, unfortunately, sorry, the readers will find out for definite a big reason why the guys, these supposed aliens, have attacked.
Oh, wait that long. So I've done books, just for everyone else. I've done book 1 and 2, and I've got 3, 4, and 5, or 4, or 3 and 5, something like that. Oh,
I know.
Wait all the way till then.
It's sadistic. But put it like this: if we put the same sort of thing in an epic fantasy book, you wouldn't even have noticed. You'd have just been reading the book, and you'd have got, you'd get to that point, and you'd go, oh wow, and this is like the sort of Act 3 thing. So there have been probably some fairly subtle hints. But the thing, so if you start reading it now, and this is the sort of the weird thing about books, when we're reading a series as it's coming out, it always, it's always, if you're really into it, you really want to get that next book,
and
the next one. I remember getting into Harry Potter on a trip to the States because my flatmate who I went on the trip with, he'd been given them by his sister or something, so he had like the first 4 Harry Potter books, and like we ended up stranded for a few days in Washington DC. Long story, but anyway, point is, we ended up, after we'd done the museums, we were bored waiting for another friend we were supposed to meet over there. So we ended up just reading these Harry Potter books, and I had to wait for him to so that I could borrow his books off him, and then I had to wait for the rest of the books to come out.
Yeah.
But of course, if you were doing it now, you would just power through them at your own pace and go from one to the other, and it wouldn't even bother you that you're not finding out the next secret.
Yes.
Because you can just pick up the next book and keep reading. Just like binge watching TV, there's a certain appeal to not watching something until it's completely finished. Downside of that is that TV companies have this nasty habit. People don't
cancel
watch
it.
Season 1, they cancel it. Yeah, authors don't really do that quite so much, but people do because they're hard nosed about the business.
But what some authors do, they cut the series short and sort of cram the last book. I had that with what I found. It was Anthony James's Defying Rust. Now I really liked that. I thought it was really good. The first couple books really led on. There was a bit of a dull one, and I think book 4 or 5 was really good. And then something new happened in the next book, but then they took it. He took it away for the next book, and it's like this whole book was getting this thing. And then they had it the next book, and then they took it away, and then they sort of finished the last book, and it just finished. And I spoke to the guy, and he's like, "Nah, not doing no more of that series." It's like I can see you've just crammed as much as you can to tie it up. And it was fell flat on its face. The ending, like everyone's all good, nice little bow, and it's finished. It's like, but there's so many questions that you brought into the whole thing, and it's like,
yeah.
But then if he's got no readers for that series, then why spend time?
That's the hard thing.
Yeah.
A lot of the authors I know have worked out what is going to happen in their series, what they want to happen in their series, and what you can do is work out, well, let's say the series isn't hugely successful, or successful enough for me, because I mean it's all relative. What's good enough for me and James is different to somebody who's already got 50 books out and needs a certain level of income. Like I have 0 kids, right? I am unmarried. I have, I don't have the responsibility.
Me, myself, and
looking
I.
after people. Yeah. So, and James currently has another job. So there's a different level of need for our series success. And I absolutely get that. And what some of my friends and colleagues do is you could say you wanted to do a 9-book series, right? You're hoping your series would have 9 good strong books, where you can work out your outline in such a way that if you get to the end of book 3, you've got a satisfying arc that could be a trilogy there. So nobody's reading book 2, then you can wrap it up in a nice bow, hopefully, and it's not as satisfying. But then if you put the next series out and it sells twice as much, right, then there was an issue with that other series that may not be recoverable. And that's problematic. But one of the things for authors is that we do have the option to finish off series in a way that you can't so easily with a TV series. And I hate it when TV series are cancelled, right? If it's a TV series I'm into, I want them to have invested in it sufficiently to make the whole season arc. Like The Expanse TV series has been cancelled. There was some cast drama going on there, which I'm not going to touch on, but they're not going to do the full arc of the books.
The last 3, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
Is it like that? Yeah.
It's probably going to be something like that. I'm not sure they've gone into too much detail, but they are supposed to be getting to a satisfying point within that, which is disappointing to me, because it would have been nice for them to find a solution, but I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it's wrapping it up as well as you can that is the biggest problem, because sometimes you've got 2 or 3 seasons and then you don't get anything at all. It just cuts off. And that is super disappointing. I really enjoyed Sense8 on Netflix, which was ridiculously complicated and not to everybody's taste, because what they did was they actually had, the way they constructed it, they had to move the cast from location to location around the planet for a TV series. TV series don't shoot.
That's a lot of money, that is.
Yeah, they don't shoot in locations, because they were going to I don't know which locations they actually did, but they had it set in Asia, in Europe, in America, and in South America, at least. And you're like, if they were actually visiting even half of those locations, that's kind of insane, because they were moving the cast, who were, the characters are spread around the world, but they were moving the cast to be with the others because of the mythology of the show. So it was hugely expensive, so it makes sense. But what they did was they wrapped it up with like a 2-hour special or something, rather than just cutting it off, which is better than you usually get. Now with our books, we originally were aiming for 9 books to wrap up the whole series, and the initial invasion of New Bristol is by an enemy that ends up being called the Deathless.
That's it. I was just thinking, what are they called again? Death something.
Yeah. So they're calling it the Deathless War now, and then there's going to be a second half of the series, which we expect to run another 6 books, and that will provide the conclusion to the story that we want to do. And we will absolutely write that. We're not we're writing book 7. That will happen. We're not writing any other series at the moment together. James has got some books of his own that he's been working on. I have things waiting in the wings that I'd like to finish. Well, such as you can see Thief Taker above my head. That was the first book I published. That's a fantasy world, and I want to finish that off, but it's not my priority because we need to satisfy the fans of the Royal Marine Space Commandos, and there's quite a number of them. We're behind on where we wanted to be for various reasons, but we will finish that 12-book sequence. And then there are some ideas of things that we don't, how do I put this? Things that we don't need to wrap up, but we could provide more books on and a whole satisfying other set of events that would follow on fairly directly from the end of the war that follows the Deathless War, right? Because we didn't want to write one war in our series. We've got two wars running at the same time. So we could run to, well, James a while ago said when we were working on some of the outlining, I said, yeah, we'll finish at 12, and he said, oh well, or 15, and I was like, hang on, what do we need these other 3 books for? Well, I've got this idea, and then the other day, he said to me, or 18, and I'm like, what? Where are these extra books coming from?
I think, with going that long, you need to wrap up the Pacific story, then start a new story in the same universe, because you can get something I've seen on a lot of fans talking about book series. A lot of time they don't like a long series sometimes, because they feel like the author's just dragging it out. Where if they wrap up that series, still write the same universe, but use the other ideas as a new, fresh people. Because if it's the same characters over and over and over again in a dragged out story, it can come a bit stale. Yeah.
I mean that's a perfectly reasonable concern. And what we're going to do is we're going to complete the story at 12 books. Well, unless
something happens,
and unless that drags out and it has to be 14 books or whatever, but 12 books should be fine. If there is still demand at book 12 for more stuff within the same universe, we have we have these other ideas of events that could take place, and will we believe will be satisfying for people to read. We've also got because we've got this whole wide universe, we've also got a companion series that will cover some of the events on New Bristol, because the focus is always on, in the main series, is always on the frontline people going out and performing aggressive and defensive missions, both Marines and the Royal Navy, as the Royal Navy gets dragged into the conflict. And dragged in, that doesn't sound good. As the Royal Navy arrives, because they can't
obligates in their job to defend the people underneath the royal. I guess we've got to go and get involved in this now.
It's not like the colonies are calling them up and they're going, oh, do we have to go to a war? It's no.
Do we have to defend you? Surely you can get your own pitchfork or something. Come on now.
But so that will cover some of the fighting that's still going on New Bristol, whilst other events are going on, because the Deathless get a hold on the world of New Bristol, so they've got their own city there, and then there's some fighting, there's some diplomacy, there'll be more of the drone kids that I know you found amusing.
It was good. It was just a whole added, like, drones are, the way our military is going, drones anyway, they're such an effective cost, life saving thing, but there's obviously other issues that it's just people become so desensitized to killing people. But like it was good, how the drones interacted and helped, because you would use little spy drones, and all them little things really can give you an edge over other people.
Yes,
I like it. And the characters were good as well. I enjoyed the girl and her little cast, or the drone racing people. I can't remember what it's called now, off the top of my head.
So I mean, we with the technology, we've tried to do what most people in the genre do, which is just iterate off what's normally around, and not make everything much more advanced than it is now. There's a lot of discussion over whether or not, will we ever replace what we've got as firearms now? You put a bullet in the gun, in a magazine, and you shoot bullets with an explosive, and it's that's relatively simple when you think about it. Will it ever become lasers? Will that ever be practical? There's a lot of practical reasons to think that it will be a very long time, if ever, before anybody changes that model of gun.
Well, the technology, you need the power source, and all these things alone need to be as powerful as they can be at such a small size, as well as the maintenance of, if it becomes, computerized more, for example, say, there could be things that can jam it, stop it, cut it out, and then your gun's no good. You have to use it as a bat. Where if it's a bullet, you can't jam a bullet.
Yeah,
it still does its job as long as it can actually penetrate and do what it's intended to do. You could never stop it not working.
No. They're comparatively simple. I mean, right now the Americans are coming closer than they have to adopting caseless ammunition, which most major weapon manufacturers have worked on. There are three types of weapon that they're reviewing at the moment for their future weapons, whatever it is. It's not the future weapons program, but that was the last one that failed, right? And a couple of them are kind of caseless ammunition variants, and they're moving to 6.8 millimeter because that's more effective at very long range, or what is currently very long range. It's a whole thing, but the platform that you see them using at the moment, the M4, that's off the M16, and that was from the Vietnam era, right? So it's ancient. It's ancient in a sense. And if you look at the weapons that preceded it, they were also used for a very, 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 very long time. And it's not for want of trying. The first, I watched a Royal Armouries historian the other day talking about the birth of the SA-80, our current rifle, which is quite good in its current version. But it was around, I think he said it was around World War One that the first bullpup rifles were becoming a thing and being examined by the Royal Armouries for potential use by the British Army. And so weapon development is faster and slower than you might think. And when you're writing military sci-fi, yeah, sure, it's very tempting to make everything lasers and blasters and all sorts of stuff like that. But at the same time, pardon me, your stories are really about people, and what's going on in their heads and what challenges they're facing. So the setting is just window dressing in a sense. So yes, there are drones, but if you look at our drones, we haven't made them as far in the future as they realistically will be by then. Like we've got high end 3D printing going on. The colonist kids on the planet make their own drones, right? To them, it's a bit like Meccano or Lego or whatever. They, you know, they've got access to 3D printers. They can make drones. They're not weaponized drones. They start out as weaponized drones, but if you invade some kid's planet, don't expect him to take it sitting down. You know, so you know, they that's one of their hobbies as people living in this advanced society. You know, they can build drones, they can play around with them. They've got a big planet they can mess around with them on, and they race them against each other. But the drones themselves are just, you know, they're probably not all that much more sophisticated than what you can go and get in your local shops right now. Yeah, sure, they technically they are and they would be, but we aren't positing them as the kind of drones that would really be there in that society at that time. And again, we've got people fighting against each other, but my personal expectation is that hundreds of years from now, humans won't be fighting each other over anything, because that's kind of pathetic, right? I don't want that future for humanity. But the necessity of military science fiction is that you do have a conflict, and that's fine, because you can absolutely make it clear that the people engaging in the conflict are doing so because at least somebody is stupid, or doing something that is stupid. You know, that's fine. You know, so yeah, I mean, we our whole arc, you know, will after book 6, you'll find there'll be a bit of a turning point, and it will go into more of the reasoning that the Deathless War started in the first place, and like I say, that, and unless we get into so much content that it takes, you know, a couple of books worth of material to wrap up that actual story, it should be all wrapped up within 6 books. So there'll be 12 books in total, and then various side books, prequels, short stories, and stuff like that. Like we've got there's one short story volume out there at the moment, which is 10 Tales, and that's just 3 short stories, and we'll be doing so. I should probably clarify this. So in the books, there's a character called Marine X, who is a penal marine, and he has because he's Marine X, as in Roman numerals, he's known as 10 colloquially, and so 10 Tales is not 10 stories; it's tales about 10. It's his possibly true, possibly Shaggy Dog story tales. Who knows? His most of his file is redacted, which again, that's sort of stuff that you will, you know, over the length of the series, you will find out a lot more about him. And you know, why is his file redacted? It's all woven into the backstory that we're working through. But we're working on those short stories, and we've got more short stories coming up, and we'll do a bunch of you know, just short books to, you know, to make those short stories available. Yeah. And then it's likely there's a couple of ways we could do it, but ultimately what I'd like to do is what as we conclude it is gather all the 10 tales into one volume and then make it available just like that. But the intention of the series is that most people will be reading it on Kindle Unlimited anyway. So if you're reading in Kindle Unlimited, you borrow a book, and you can borrow up to 10 books at a time, and it makes no difference to, you know, you're paying a monthly subscription. You can borrow and read as many books in a month as you can. So short story volumes are, you know, that doesn't make any difference to you. But you know, there are lots of time periods between our world right now and the world of the Royal Marine Space Commandos that we could explore. And for instance, we've also got the By Strength and Guard trilogy, and that takes place during the Deathless War. Marine X gets sent off on a special forces mission um, across the galaxy somewhere else because there's a completely different threat, and his unique set of skills.
Killing people.
Yeah.
Let's be realistic. Let's say what it is. Killing.
Yes, he is very good at killing people.
He enjoys it.
He does have genuinely specific knowledge, which means that he's useful for that mission.
Yeah.
And it's to do with his length of service. So he goes and performs that mission, and then he comes back to the Deathless War. So that whole thing takes place between the end of Book 5, Dreadnought, and then the start of Book 6. But it is, I think people will enjoy it. There's more to tell in that area if enough people get into that trilogy, and we're hoping the omnibus will boost readership of that. But it's not fundamental to the main story of Commando, Guerrilla, and so on. But we for that book, because we brought back a character with 10 called Marine Jackson, and he, for various reasons, he can't stay where he was, so he joins our team for Fleet onwards. So there's a novella that I wrote for the By Strength and Guile trilogy, which is just a bonus in there, which covers one of Marine Jackson's earlier missions, and has, our work has a few references to popular pop culture films and TV and all sorts. It's fairly obvious to recognise, even if you're not British, a lot of it. But yeah, I don't know. I think I've just been waffling, and I'm not sure.
Anyway, you're just talking about your books. It's fine. It is what it is. Right, we are coming up to an hour.
Yep.
Is there anything you specifically want to talk about? I know we was going to talk about other stuff, but there's no problem you coming back for another video.
No, I can come back another time if
that's perfect. Well, it's done to go over an hour, because if it's too long, people might not. That's just like keeping an hour. But so we can talk about. We can. Do you want to talk a little bit about the other book, the Fleet? No, not the Fleet. What's it called? No, the 3-book one.
So By Strength and Guile. That was
yeah.
So
yes.
Right. So so the By Strength and Guile trilogy is a co-authored project that that we did with Paul T, who is a British sci-fi writer, and there's a very long story about the ins and outs of publishing on Amazon, but they raised some issues with it, which were kind of silly. They sort of a false positive of, oh, we're not sure we like this book, or something, whatever. They sometimes identify books as being something they don't want to publish.
Oh.
Because of things like copyright questions they've got over it. Obviously, we do have the copyright for the books, but for all sorts of reasons, we couldn't get that resolved last year, and it took a long time to get around to republishing it. But it did, they were happy to publish it this time. We didn't run across the same sorts of things, so we've now got that out there, and we're hoping that will sort of revitalize sales of that series. I mean, in an ideal world, the idea was that we would write, Paul would write more books in that series, and expand on the adventures of those characters. But there's a complete trilogy there, but there's more things that could happen, and prequels and things, which if there's ever enough traction, we might be able to explore. But otherwise, it comes to a satisfying conclusion, and it is what it is. I'd love to be able to write more in that area, and we'd also like to get other co-authors in to explore other parts of our universe.
Mm-hmm.
Because while we concentrate on the British fight against the Deathless, but there are other
countries,
other countries also being attacked, and we had hoped to, for instance, find an American author who could write a sequence, or be it a trilogy or more or less, about some US forces and their struggle against the Deathless, which would be in a slightly different vein, and give sort of their perspective. But there was this minor blip in in the world, and it's been hard. It's been hard to do anything, because we went to a conference right before all the drama started happening, like in was it late February or early March? Yeah,
March is when it kicked off for us properly,
yeah,
but it started in about November, December, didn't it? But then for us, it kicked off in March.
So it was timed with London Book Fair, and we got to do our conference, but nobody else turned up to London Book Fair. London Book Fair was cancelled because all the big companies, all the big publishing companies, by that point they couldn't be sending staff to events like that. They were allowed to travel, but you can't really say to your staff, "We're pretty sure we're going to stop doing events in 2 weeks from now, at the most. Would you like to go there?" It's
you might be stranded, but
yeah, that's an insurance liability, and if a bunch of the big companies pull out, then there's no point most of the people going to London Book Fair, because it's a trade show, and it's not really for the general public. I think the public can go if they want, but they don't sell books there to the public, except for I think there's a little bit of an event right at the end of the thing where they go, all these books that are on our stands, we're going to try and flog these off cheap, because then we don't have to take them home. Anyway, London Book Fair didn't go ahead last year. I think it's due to go on middle of the year rather than spring this year, or late in the year this year. So I hope to be able to go to that. But we make our connections with potential co-authors at events like that.
Yes.
There's a number of indie author conferences and so on, and we just haven't been able to find somebody else to write in the series. If we ever do, then we would absolutely, go for another series and find an outline for whoever it was that would make sense and give a satisfying a satisfying look at another portion of our universe.
It sounds like a good thing. I mean, all it does is just make your universe bigger and helps them, helps you, and then buy it. And the thing is, because it's very British sort of thing, it definitely caters more to the British people who like that sort of stuff, where the Americans might not so much. Whereas, because like military sci-fi is big in America, much bigger than what it is for us, I think.
Yes, I mean the whole book market is bigger in America, but yeah. I mean, we had pretty good success in America. It's tailed off a bit at the moment, but we're trying to get more books out, and hopefully we'll get our numbers up in America as we get books 7, 8, 9. The more frequently you can publish, and the more publishing more frequently helps, but also finishing series helps, and publishing regularly. Like if you published a 12-book series, one a year, people will be used to that, and
it's keeping a pattern.
Yeah,
they need to know that, okay, I read this book in 4 months, in 2 years, whatever, the next book's coming out. I can read all these other books and make sure I'm ready for this book that comes out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there are people out there who only read omnibus volumes, they only read completed series, and you know that's perfectly understandable. And the thing is, every single year there's a bunch of new 25-year-olds, right? All the people who were 24 last year are now 25, and so you've always got a new market, which is why you see things like Harry Potter and Narnia are always high in the charts, because pretty much every kid gets them and reads them.
That's it.
So, you know, it's worth finishing our series, and once we finish it, we've got other options. We can write more in other parts of our universe. We can do a whole new universe. We can do our own thing. Like I said, I mean, James has pretty much written an urban fantasy series, and he's going to be working on getting that polished in any time when we're not working on the Royal Marine Space Commandos. So we had because I had some productivity issues caused by me getting kind of miserable, and you could probably say depressed, but I never actually got a diagnosis from anybody. But had I sat down with anybody who could legitimately diagnose me, they might have said I was depressed. So book 5 came out in September 2019, and it's taken until right up to the end of March, early April that we got book 6 out, and that isn't going to be the case with book 7. That's going to happen in the next couple of months. I'm in a much healthier place right now. I'm in a much more mentally healthy place. Although I have actually dropped a couple of stone, was like 25 pounds for any American listeners, in that time period as well. But we're expecting productivity to continue at a pace, and I can't tell you when book 7 is out, but I can tell you that we've got like 35,000 words of rough draft already written, and our books are sort of 70 to 85,000 words, something like that. From volume to volume. Commando. Oh, I can't get this right at all.
First
Commando
one
is a novella, because we had originally planned to write a bunch of novellas, but the moment we got to Guerrilla, it just ballooned into a full-length novel. And once we'd committed to audio, it was too late to go back through Commando and make it bigger, which is why it's always it's cheaper than all the other.
That's why you changed it to this, wasn't it?
Well, so that is a 2-volume thing that contains Commando and Guerrilla, because our audiobook publisher Podium likes to do publishers packs slightly longer, so they do a couple of books at a time, sometimes 3 books at a time, because audio listeners on Audible, they like to spend 1 credit and get
the biggest thing they can.
Yeah. So longer books, 10 hours and above, do well, so they wanted to do it that way. So we did our initial omnibus volumes in pairs, to match the audio books.
Do you know 10 hours? How long is that? What's that in words? Word count, 10 hours.
Off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure I've heard that it's something like 9,500 words an hour or something. It is a fairly average rate for them to narrate audio. It's way higher than you would imagine.
80-ish.
Yeah. So
90,000. Well, it was 10 hours, 9,000
Yeah.
times 10 hours is 90,000, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's 9,000 words, give or take. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Which is one of the reasons Epic Fantasy does so well on audio. I mean, you look
Well,
at
they're big, aren't they? That's the thing.
Yeah. You like see 40-hour books, and well, okay, but I mean, it also changes quite a bit, because of course some narrators have a relatively slow way of speaking, and it sounds great, but other people are significantly faster. So I couldn't tell you what the difference is between
I
the
know
ratings.
some of the people who do Booktube with me. They actually run all their they listen to stuff at like 2 times, 3 times speed and stuff. They just like to just get through it. Like they want a bigger story, but they just want to get through it. And I need it slow because I'm slow brained, I suppose. Like I miss stuff when it's going slow. But I'm usually like doing other jobs. I'm doing a job, and then I'll be listening to it, and I forget. I'm like, what happens? I have to go back like 30 seconds. But they're like, yeah, we just do it like 2 times speed, 3 times speed, and like we listened to it normal once. And it was like really slow. I was like, how do you even know what they're saying? How do you keep on track of it? We just learn. So, but I forget at 1 time speed what happens. How like 2 times speed gone.
I watched a thing the other day. So I tend to listen to podcasts a little bit faster, like 1.15 or something like that, or and sometimes audiobooks as well. But I tend to find people start to sound funny to me when when you speed up too much.
Yeah.
I was watching one of Graham Stephan's. He's a big YouTuber. He does like finance stuff mostly.
Mm-hmm.
But they interview a lot of people about their businesses, and they were talking. It was very strange. They were doing an episode. They were talking to this one guy about one thing, and then his mate was in the background, and they brought his mate on, and I was like, this could have been 2 whole episodes of 2 fascinating people. But this other guy was talking about this app that he does, which is getting big time. Like, we'd like to buy your app from people like Google type that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's I can't remember the name of it, but it's an app for reading text out to you. And he was saying people read at like they listen to stuff at like 2.5 speed and stuff like that, and they're absorbing non-fiction text really, really quickly. And they have a thing built into their app that lets you not only does it monitor how quickly you're getting through through material, because I think it can read things to you like anything you put into it, any text, it reads it to you, right? Not as in it's an audio book, as in it will narrate like the web to you if you want it to, or PDF or whatever. And they use obviously sort of AI voices to make it work. But the guy was talking about how fast he consumes content and what his retention of that content is. And he was saying, it's trainable. These, people listen to this stuff and they start off slow and they get faster and faster and faster and faster. And they have a little bit of rivalry between people where they're sort of trying to outdo each other. And it was quite fascinating because they were, our ability to absorb stuff is a lot faster than you might think. And people don't always want to savor it in quite the same way. So, I mean, I'm fine with it. If people want to listen to our audiobooks at high speed, more power to them, by all means. And I don't know what will happen with the later books. Podium were last we spoke to them, because it was a conference that they were certainly planning to do the later books, but then we've had production issues, entirely my fault, not James's. So those books will come out on audio later, but what they'll probably do is do a big recording session to catch up. A recording session. I mean, they'll do a block of recording with our narrator.
Sit down for an hour and get it all done,
rather than say, "Oh, well, if you've got a week here and a week there," that was the broad plan. So, it's kind of crazy how much people can listen to on audio, and I think even with the big dense fantasy epics and stuff, some people do listen to them much faster than I think either you or I would be comfortable with. I can't do it. But my particular problem is I did a lot of my audiobook listening when I would be out walking around the shops, which I do as little as possible now, so I don't listen to audio. And I'd also listen to stuff and then like when I was going to bed. So I'd wake up the following morning
Oh no.
Because there's a feature on Audible where you can go, oh yeah, stop after the next chapter or stop after 30 minutes or something like that. And I'd occasionally remember to use that, but most of the time I'd wake up in chapter
Story's
39
still going.
with no idea of where.
You wake up and it's like the end. Thank you. You've been listening to audio or something like that. And it's like, no, the whole story's gone.
Or there's some big reveal. And the worst bit for me was never knowing quite when I started again. So I
when you fell asleep.
Yeah, and it's nothing to do with the book. It's to do with me being tired. It's not that the books are bad, but number of books I've had to listen to, probably 3 or 4 times before I've actually gone through them in properly. But yeah,
I understand. My partner does it. She always goes to sleep. I say to her, you go to sleep, listen to books. How do you know where you are? So I just know. It's like, how do you know?
I don't get that. It's one of those things I can understand other people can do it. I don't know how they do it. I've even found myself with my tablet, because I mostly use my normal tablet, not a Kindle. I've even found myself sort of going scrolling through and then waking up because I'm lying there and I've got the thing in front of me. You
fell asleep scrolling.
Stand on the mattress, right? And fell asleep and I've scrolled to a different part of the book. Which isn't so bad on Kindle because it'll tell you when your last read. You can actually skip back. It's got a thing that has a pretty good. I don't know how they work it out. Probably because you scroll too quickly or something, and it goes, "Oh, weren't you on chapter 26?" And you go, "Yeah, I think I was." And that's bonkers because I'm basically unconscious at some point. But at some point in that drifting bit, you're trying to turn pages and your fingers are touching the keys.
You prefer sleep with your finger on it, sort of you're twitching.
Yeah. And I have to lie on my side to do that because I've discovered I have another bad sleeping habit with my tablet, which is lying on my back, which hurts my neck, and and I do it anyway. So it's much like when I used to sit on the toilet as a kid because your parents don't make you get off the toilet early, right? So they don't make you go and do chores or homework when you're I'm on the loo, And I'd sit there until my legs went dead reading Terry Pratchett or whatever. But my adult version of that is I've got a tablet and I'm lying back and I wake up when it smacks me in the face.
Or you wake up.
Yeah. And I am worried that one day I'm going to forget to turn over on my side, have it smack me in the face, and it'll be a trip to the dentist. How did you lose 2 feet? Did you get in a fight or fall off a mountain bike or something? No, I dropped a tablet on my face.
It's a bad way to go. Right, we're gonna have to wrap this up. 1, because we've gone over time. 2, because I really need to pee.
Fair enough.
We will do another one because
sure.
we still all got a lot more stuff I want to cover. And I like having guests come on. Maybe we'll come back and do one of the writing videos, and I think I'm going to start doing some sort of just general podcast where we just talk crap with writers, and you can talk about whatever you want, talk about general day, so fans might be able to get an actual insight of what the people are like, not just someone trying to promote a book or give advice on something. You know what I mean? So if you want to talk about problems you have with printers, then by all means. That was in the pre-show. But that's it. Right. So thank you, John, for coming and joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
That's fine. All your contact information I will put in the description, and I will send you the link once it's downloaded. Probably Tuesday. Oh, so cool. Oh, I'm tired. I need a pee and tired. Right. Thank you everyone for watching. If you've got this far, love you all that stuff. Goodbye.
From Hollywood is that
just pause. 1 sec. I've got to let my dog out. It's whimpering. It's going to keep barking. Hold that thought. I'm going to edit this out. I'm going to snip it. But 1 second. Come on, dog. Come on. I heard it. He did this little thing. I heard his little tip tops out, like his little, I just lost my ear bit. Oh no. Oh, I've lost my earpiece. Oh, I'll just stick it like that. Oh, I've lost one of me.
Just look for it, man.
No, it's like, like the rubber bits.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's going to be uncomfortable, isn't it?
I can't hear. Oh, there it is. Found it. Yeah, so like, I heard these little tidbits on the floor. Oh, my dog's there, and it went. Ooh. I was like, right, I need to go out for a toilet. And it's either going to peel the floor or I need to go out. So it's kind of like, reel it out.
Don't worry. I don't know if you've watched Brandon Sanderson's streams that he.
Oh, yes, a parrot. I know.
Yeah, the parrot, and like I got a friend who's got a parrot, and she was like, "What? Why is he letting that parrot get so close to his ear and his spectacles? It's like it's going to eat his ear. One day he's going to lose an ear." You know? And I'm like, okay, like, he seems to think he knows what he's doing with the parrot, but I agree. I wouldn't let a small dinosaur anywhere near my ear.
Well, that's it. You know what I mean? A de-evolved dinosaur that might still have a chip on the shoulder. Mm.
Yeah. It's like, or just like, how do I explore things with my big beak that can crack hard nuts?
Oh, this is quite soft.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've heard it said that that's what sharks are doing when they bite people. That they're like babies; they explore things with their mouths. And if you'll get bitten by a shark, the exploration is a lot worse than being gnawed on by a small puppy or something.
Well, sharks actually don't want to attack us. They've got no. They're not actually trying to get us. They just see a splash, get confused, or they're like, "What is this? Oh, no, I don't like you." Go off, and you're like, dying, bleeding everywhere. Like,
And that is the real reason people survive, because if they wanted to take the second bite, right? Then
the first bite they'll take you under, and you're done. You know, like.
Yeah. There's all these people saying, "Oh, I punched it on the nose and got away with it," and it's like,
no, let go.
You've ever thrown a punch underwater? It doesn't go very quickly because of the water. You know?
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, there's bullets stop in water, so your punch is not gonna go that far.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Do you remember what you're saying? Because
anyway,
I do remember.
So,
but right, we're gonna.
I was saying